everyone was at each other's throat, and there was a lot of anger, animosity, resentment. Talk about how broken people create broken homes and broken people break other people. I didn't want that to be my story. I needed to learn what healthy looks like. It was so very crucial.
Welcome back, family. In today's episode, we're picking up from where I left off in the last one, talking about our healing process after going or growing up in broken homes. And so today, Oge is going to be sharing her story with us, and we're going to jump straight into it. You can take it away.
So I grew up in Lagos with my family, and my family consisted of me, my older sisters, and my dad. And for the longest time, I kind of understood that to be what a domestic family looked like. And then, growing up, you don't really know you lack something until somebody points it out. So I wasn't really aware of a mom figure missing until, I needed her. And so whenever I turned about 10, going, preteen, going into teenage years, and it's like, oh, where is this lady that has missed basically every part of my life? And then as she came back into my life, it was a little rough patch in terms of getting her acquainted, back into our lives, and navigating that relationship, because there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of frustration, like, you weren't there for me. And with being a teenager, everything is so overly emotional and everything. So there was a lot of forgiveness. There had to be a lot of realizing the whole story from both sides, because for the longest time I only had one side of the story and making judgment based on that side. So as I got older, I noticed that their marriage was, for lack of a better word, trash. And that is putting it mildly. There was an incredible amount of fights. There was no safety, very little safety actually, in terms of being in a home and being in a loving environment. It was everyone was at each other's throat, and there was a lot of anger, animosity, resentment, and just everyone wanted to have their voice heard. And it seems like no one was listening, but everybody wanted to speak. And that was just rough navigating. That was just, rough. Yeah, rough, I would say it's a word that I'll use for that. And so college was definitely an escape, in terms of finally I don't have to deal with the constant argument, the constant criticism, all of that. And I get to just define myself. And mind you, this, which was kind of strange but also perfect, because that was the time where God became more real to me. He snatched me up at the perfect time, and I'm so grateful to him for that. So what I mean by God snatching me up, so I knew that this was the time that I would determine what path that I wanted to take for my life, based on everything that I had been through, or based off of everything that had happened prior. I didn't want that to define what my future looked like. I had been, at such a young age, I was already over a conflict centered home. I was over it. Like, I didn't want any I mean, you can't 100% avoid conflict. It's a part of getting to know who you're with, but I didn't want that to be such a huge part. I didn't want that to be integrated as a norm in the home I would build. So the fear of not wanting to repeat what I grew up around. And if you listen to anyone, they always talk about how broken people create broken homes and broken people break other people. I didn't want that to be my story. I didn't want to live this entire, I didn't want to spend my entire time on earth to just be from one disastrous situation to another. So I needed to learn what healthy looks like. It was so very imperative, like it was so very crucial. So with that mindset of, no, I don't want this to be my forever, God started to guide my heart. He started to guide me into watching other couples as they interacted, couples that I was fortunate enough to be around, be it through church or sporting events or school and things like that. I was able to just observe how he talked to her, how she treated him, and then realize, wait a minute, it's not the same in every home. Like I said earlier, you don't really know what you don't have until you see, and then you realize that, oh my God, this is there's a discrepancy here. This is what it's supposed to look like. So I as I saw what it was supposed to look like, I was like, but how did they get that? How and why do we not have that? I mean, I'm not my effort was not put into reshaping or changing my current home, the home that I grew up in,
Yeah.
but in terms of reshaping my mindset for the future, my future home that I would create with somebody. And then that was when I started to ask questions. I started to ask the people that I looked up to and people that I observed at the time. Hey, how did you get this? What did you look for in your wife? What did you look for in your husband? What made this person interesting to you? What made this person a potential for you? And started to hear things like, oh, she was very simple, or oh, he was dependable, oh, he was an honest person, and he was someone that didn't really try to fit in with the crowd or change who he was to please other people, just things like that. And then I didn't ask everybody, but
Right.
the few people that I saw gems in their marriage and I saw their marriage was gold, tried and tested by my my 17-year-old brain
Right.
as good and everything. So yeah, so it gave me a better understanding as to what it entailed. And then even at that, I still had a strong fear of marriage. I had a strong opposition. I was like, oh no, if this, if it's gonna end up this way, I want nothing to do with it. If it's gonna end up with all the crazy words being thrown at each other, and so God definitely had to step in that part. And what he did, which God is so funny, he's so good, he started to give me a very small desire to just learn what his original intent for marriage was. So with that, I started to watch, you know, like real stories, watch people's talk to older people, really hear their story, hear what they've been through, how their spouse helped them through, be it parents, deceased parents, and just help them through how they were there for each other, do say something as awful as a foreclosure happening or a kid passing, and just the things that life throws at you unexpectedly, or losing a job, losing your ability, losing in terms of mobility rather, and still having a spouse, having somebody that is right there beside you through it all. I was like, I want this. It was like the mindset of, oh, marriage is just a cage, started to crumble down, because I finally learned the truth about, no, you get to have a companion, at least God's original intent for it. I'm not saying that's how it looks like now in today's, day in this day and age for everybody. No, but God's original intent was so you don't do life alone, because he never intended for us to do life alone. And I thought I remember just after watching this one video, and it had been days and days of just healthy marriage, and not the way Disney sells it with like no, it was real, and it was routine, and it was boring,
Right.
it was there were roles, and there was compatibility, there was things that made essentially the home survive
Yeah.
whatever was thrown at it. So learning those things and so I remember just one evening, or one night, super late at night, and mind you, I was in college at this time, and I had classes the next day, but I just remember breaking down, because it was as though like I had been fed a lie for so long, and that lie hardened my heart towards marriage. But then it just felt like those walls were crumbling down, and I just broke down and cried and cried and cried, because then I realized that no, not only do I want this, no, I need this in my life. I need, I didn't want to depend on my relatives in terms of my mom to be there and by God's grace, he had, prior to that, exposed me to even what to look like. So even what to look for. So I had a little more sense of um peace going into looking around me, seeing what options were there, because I knew what to look for to a
Right.
degree,
Right.
and what would stand the test of time.
So what is that? What were you looking for? Because the list that you gave as to the couples that you were interviewing and researching didn't sound like a lot of physical stuff.
Right.
You were talking about traits like dependability and love and kindness and things like that.
Right.
So did that translate into what you were looking for, or did you have some aspects that were like, no, this person has to be Nigerian or because I'm Ghanaian, so hey, I mean, we know how that panned out, but like, how did you go into it?
I think for me, I went wide, like in terms of I didn't care what nationality they were. I didn't
Oh.
care if they were able or disabled. I didn't care how tall they were. I didn't care what their hair color, skin color. None of that mattered. It became solely about who is this person, who are they when no one is looking, and who are they to everyone around them, not only to me. So that became utmost important. I mean, yes, there is the first foundational requirement of, are they a child of God? And then right, and do they actually live what they profess? Are they someone that is genuine about loving God and wanting to please him with their character and everything? And so one thing that I for sure knew that I had on that list was someone that exemplified the character of Christ in terms of they knew what love and respect was in terms. Okay, so for instance, one, they feared God was a must. Two, they loved and respected me because they had already gone to God to teach them what it meant to love, and they understood respect. And then three, we had similar ideas of what we wanted for our life, the vision and where we were going, and we agreed to the same things: how to raise a kid, how to deal with finances, how to deal with relatives, how to deal with, and things like that were so major. So everything like that was minor, I didn't care about.
You consider the physical things minor?
I feel like how do I put this? Anything that couldn't stay exactly the same or at least grow in a positive way, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, 40 years into marriage was not non-essential.
So like you can't you didn't want to love someone or approach someone based on like having dreadlocks because I could go bald is essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And if you wanted to, you can go to the gym in your 20s and in your 30s, and then in your 40s you're focused on something else and then decide to not go anymore. You know what I mean? But if you're a caring person or a loving person, it's very, unless something super like disastrous happened, even at that, knowing how to recover from that,
right?
And
who you are. It's
who you are,
harder
exactly,
to change that.
exactly. It's harder to change.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
And I made sure to, like, one thing that was important was, okay, I I didn't want to be in a place where I only knew what I didn't want, but I think a lot of people, they end up knowing what they don't want. Oh, I don't want this, I don't want this, but they don't end up knowing what they actually do want. So they go in with this whole elimination thing, but they don't know what to check off or what to qualify.
Right.
They're like, oh, well, he's not rude or he's not this, but then you have to know as well, but he has to be kind, or he has to be this and he has to be that, and that's actually what you get presented with. You know what I mean? Because then that's what you end up with. So
Right.
God definitely played a major role in even wanting to be married, even wanting to start a family with somebody. And right.
So yeah, I know you said to me before that you kind of picture your son especially as modeling who his dad would be.
Right.
So if you don't want your son to be X, then make sure that the person that you end up with is not that.
Right.
And for the guys, if you think of your future daughter,
right,
and you wouldn't want them acting a certain way,
right,
then you need to be very intentional about the woman who births that daughter, because
right,
daughters are gonna copy
right,
a lot from their mom,
right,
and you don't want to now be telling her, oh yeah, I know mom is like this, but don't copy that, because
right.
that's a harder job than just picking the not the perfect person. You're not gonna find the perfect person, but if your list is based on vain things,
right.
I'll give you an example. You run into a lot of trouble, but I'll give you an example. Like, okay, I spent 7 years before I met her growing out her hair. And that ball, the button I said was actually a shot at you, but you didn't catch it. You spent almost a decade growing out this beautiful hair, and she decides that less than a year into our dating relationship, she's gonna get rid of it. Like, picture, it's a Sunday morning in the middle of October, my birth month.
October 4th.
Was it 4th or 19th?
I cut it 4th. You
Okay.
saw it on the 9th, I believe.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
So it's the middle of October. We're heading to church, and I'm picking her up from her apartment, and she's walking down the stairs with like a scarf on her head. I'm like, that scarf looks not
Pretty.
very poofy. Looks very skin tight.
Right.
And so she sits in the car next to me, and she's like, she just takes off her. And this was without one. I didn't know she was about to do this. And I'm like,
you let out a scream. You're like,
did I scream?
You screamed. You're like,
I was like, bruh. I was like, okay.
Right.
And I just put out the driveway and we went to church. And of course, everyone at church was shocked because they knew Oge for her hair and the way she grew it. And now, a few years down the line, she's growing it back out. But that's the point. These things can change. She can have hair one day and decide that, you know what, I'm tired of managing this, and chops it off. Right. Later on, she can grow it back. She can decide to go to the gym every day. And then one day it's like, you know what, I'm tired of this. I don't want to be so stringent on that. And
my priorities have changed.
Right. Or your priorities have changed. Like now you're a mom and things like that. So to love someone enough to marry them, like no one is knocking attraction or physical traits that help you see that, hey, this person might be nice to talk to and stuff. But making that the priority or the main thing that you decide based on is dangerous.
Right.
Because once those things change and you didn't really vet the person's character, it becomes very shaky ground. But if you've already committed to marriage and you're doing it the way God says, then if it's not an issue of infidelity or extreme things like abuse and things like that, you're in this for the long haul. So right. What what are you gonna do if you now have to manage your kids and tell them, don't take this from dad or don't take this from mom and all of that?
I know dad goes out every night and doesn't come back in, like stuff like that. Is those are conversations you want to avoid. And what I used to tell myself is, hey, if I look at this person at this age that I'm considering for marriage, say, at the time he was 21, 22, and this person as they are is my son. If I was this person's mom, and he's this age, can I honestly say to myself that I am proud of this 21-year-old that I am considering for marriage? You know what I mean? Like if I was their mother, because right. I feel like a lot of people don't understand that marriage is not about you. It's about everything that affects you and your life, but it's not about what I want and what I desire. Like whenever you're picking, you have to make sure you're, depending on, your family circumstance. Is this person able to, take care of my family? Do they have a family, or a considerate mindset if my family was to need resources, just things like that. And not only that, like I was explaining earlier, if you had because you are giving your son or your daughter an example to look up right. to. So if that's not what you can honestly to yourself say is a good example, then it might be a good idea to just keep looking. Yeah. And one thing that a lot of people forget is that you can only encourage somebody to become who they already want to be. You are not in any position, which is a position that God holds, to completely reorient somebody into a new path. If this is who they are becoming, someone that is, you know what I mean? And
I can change him, I can change her.
Right.
Type.
And then, there are circumstances in life that change you, like having a kid and all these things. But marriage is not, it's more of a revealing factor rather than a transforming factor.
That's good. That's good. It shows you who you really are.
Exactly.
And it's like money. It's right. Like when they say if someone was poor and then they were really sweet and kind and then they got rich and became kind of rude and mean and stuff, that they didn't change. That's really who they've always been.
It exposes.
It exposes, exactly. So I mean, speaking of money, just real quick, what factor did that play in who you're looking at? Because yes, the physical traits you're saying were minor, but what about things like financial stability? And if you're looking around at the age that you were looking, early 20s, how did that play into your choice?
Well, I think we can definitely talk more, more in depth about this topic in later episodes. But just to give like a brief synopsis, for me, I desired to be a part of the story, the part of his story, and I wanted him to be a part of my story as early on as possible, and I didn't want to hear stories like, oh, when I was struggling and I needed to say get a piano. I wanted my name to be mentioned when it came to certain things that were turning points in our financial journey, because I wanted it to be something that we could both be proud of, because we both had a hand in, and everyone desires differently. I have friends that he for sure has to have it together and is on a good career path, but even at that, careers change.
Yeah.
But also learning that we see such a strange part of each other when we are both, when
When we don't have it all
when
together.
we don't have
Yeah.
it, and everything. So I wanted to see those parts
Yeah.
and know that if I was able to handle it in the beginning, and God forbid those parts where the situation happens, I didn't want to have a completely, because the money, I didn't want to have a completely
Right.
changed person, because I
Right.
never knew what they were like when they didn't have
Right.
things.
But it's also not necessarily a guarantee, because we still hear stories of people who were together in the struggle, in the pit, they make it and they still end up separated or divorced. So it's nowhere near a guarantee. But what I'm kind of getting from what you're saying is that you just wanted to build with. And that's
Yes.
something that we also talked about a lot, that wanted to be part of the building process. And that's what
Yes.
it's looked like with us. Whatever we're building together. It's now our thing. It's not
Right.
like I became a 30-year-old business mogul and then you became like a side piece, like a thing to show off because I've made it and now I have
Like
a
part of
woman.
your
Yeah, like
accomplishment.
part of my accomplishment. But
Yeah.
no, you're part and and no,
You're
you're
part and
part and
parcel.
parcel
Yes.
of my journey.
Yes.
And I'm the same thing when it comes to you. So I think
Right.
that was really good. Any last final thing you wanted to throw in?
Yes, and also, um, it was important to me that I don't stay in a relationship for years and years and years and years and years.
Oh yeah.
And because to me, it was like, okay, once we have this established, we can just, it's different mindset when you're dating somebody and when you're in a relationship with, so at least personally for me, because I felt like I was in the position mentally as to, I don't want to do anything that'll make him decide not to marry me if we have spent 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, dating. But I feel like it's easier to navigate those things in marriage, not because I'm planning on becoming a whole new person, but then it kind of shifts my mind from, oh, this is my boyfriend into this is my husband, and all the things that entailed. We're gonna definitely get into that in later episodes, but it just felt like my interview period was over, just personally for me, because I had showed him everything in my belt, tool belt, as to help him make a decision, and I feel like if we had kept dating for so long, it would feel like I was still
You're still trying to prove
in an
yourself.
interview, yeah, exactly, as to whether or not I'm fit for that job. And it would have been heart-wrenching if I end up not, quote unquote, getting the job or getting that position to be your wife, and I didn't want that to be the case.
So shorter, you would recommend a shorter dating, kind of
Intentional courting, yes.
intentional courting is
Yes.
how. Okay. And we were engaged for like 3 months as well, so even our engagement was pretty short, and then we just got straight into building. And I think that's a hack. I've said that before. I think that's a hack because, man, the things that we've been through that could end up in a breakup,
Right.
if we were just dating,
Right.
took on a whole new meaning because
Right.
we're married.
Right.
We are wearing a covenant. We are bound.
Right.
So going through those same things takes on a completely different meaning. But we don't want the episode to get too long, so we'll explore all these things in later episodes. But before we go, babe, do you know why oysters don't give to charity? Because they're shellfish.
All right, guys, have a bye, guys.
All right, yo. We'll catch you in the next one. Check out the show notes for links to our social media. And you can also shoot us an email. We'd love to answer your questions or talk about some topics that you'd like us to cover on the show. So until next time, y'all take care.